broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello and welcome to this week's show. The date is Wednesday, the 3rd of June 2020. It is just past 6 p.m. here in Melbourne. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube channel. You can interact with the show on Entropy by accessing the interface through the link in the description, and I'll also put it in the live chat throughout the evening. We're also simulcast on dlive.tv. It's the first show of Australia's 2020 winter season. No second wave of the coronavirus has come with it, like we were told would be happening. In my home state of Victoria at the beginning of June, our pubs, restaurants and cafes were finally able to reopen, although limited to 20 patrons at once, and you had to provide your contact details upon entry to dine in for coronavirus contact tracing purposes. I wined and dined on Monday evening and it was bloody fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed just sort of getting out of forgetting about this sort of whole world and just sort of having a fun night with friends. It was great. The next scheduled relaxation in Victoria is scheduled for June 22nd, when gyms and cinemas can be reopen and venue limits will be raised to 50 unless Premier Dan Andrews finds an excuse to renege on this promise. Victoria, through its mass testing blitz, now has a positive rate of 0.3%, the lowest of any state and territory in Australia. We have less than 500 active coronavirus cases nationwide. Deaths attributed to the coronavirus have actually gone down to 102 since that 30-year-old miner who died in central Queensland last week. Another test has said that he didn't have the coronavirus. So actually our death toll's gone down, believe it or not. Australians, especially those who've been stood down and had their businesses closed, are quite rightly stating the economic reopening in each state and territory is too slow to happen. But the most egregious aspect of the lockdowns was that our rights to public free speech and assembly were deemed not essential or a reasonable excuse to be outside of the home, so were hence suspended. Here in Victoria, we saw Victoria Police disgracefully shut down the Mother's Day anti-lockdown protest outside Parliament House and physically drag away the key speakers and organisers. Victoria Police were present at this past Saturday's anti-lockdown protest at the Royal Botanical Gardens in Melbourne. They did not move in this time to shut down the protest, but did bark at the attendees from time to time to maintain social distancing, even though it didn't look like they were. I've had some of the faces of Victoria's anti-lockdown movement on previous episodes of WilmsFront, such as Nick Patterson, Thanos Panides, and Rafael Fernandez. But there's also been a visible anti-lockdown movement in New South Wales, where their lockdown has been at its height as strict as Victoria's, though they are faster, or should I say, slightly faster on the way out. One of the faces of Victoria's anti-lockdown movement has been Victor Tey, who's created the Exercising My Rights social media outlet. Victor's a Sydney-sider, husband and father of 6 children. He's a Christian bishop at the Church of Liverpool, which he founded in 2015. He's been exercising every Saturday afternoon for the past 8 weeks outside New South Wales Parliament House between 2 and 4 p.m. with his Liberty headband, which he's got on now, and his sign that says, Save Lives, End the Lockdowns. His political speech while exercising has frequently attracted the ire of the New South Wales Police Force, but he has remained undeterred, returning every Saturday afternoon to exercise and plans to continue doing so. I'm glad to be joined by Victor tonight. Welcome to WilmsFront.
How you doing? It's good to be here.
Now, it was Sunday, March 29th, which feels like a lifetime ago, where Scott Morrison, after a national cabinet hookup, pretty much said without saying that we were going to a full lockdown, which that had actually been fueling, I think, the panic buying more than the virus itself. The supermarket shelves were still empty at that time because they thought that there was going to be a full lockdown, and even the supermarkets were going to be shut. That hasn't happened. But Scott Morrison said you're only allowed out for essential reasons and only with one other person not in your household or family. So it was basically house arrest. New South Wales, the fines were $1,000. In my home state of Victoria, they were $1,652. For myself, who had supported some of the shutdowns, this was way too far and draconian. Some would say it was foolish to think that the government wouldn't go this far. We had new restrictions announced by the day. How did you read the situation up until that point where we were at full lockdown?
How did I read the situation? Just clarify what you mean by that.
Well, obviously, the pandemic was declared worldwide. The virus was here. Our curve was increasing with at its peak was 400 new cases a day, and we know a lot more about the virus now than we did before. But
I guess what you're saying, like, what were my thoughts at that time when he had announced that lockdown?
And what were your thoughts on the virus itself?
Right. So I think for myself, even by that time, I was already skeptical of the numbers. So even by that time, I was thinking, and I'd watched some things and listened to some things here, that the data was very unreliable in terms of the numbers that they were giving. For example, I always sort of mentioned when they first announced that the coronavirus was, whatever times more deadly than the seasonal flu. Ben Swan did a really good piece on that, where he sort of showed that when they had quoted the mortality rate of the coronavirus, they had used a case fatality rate of like 3.4% or something like that. But then when they compared it to the seasonal flu, they used an infection fatality rate. And I thought that was sort of misleading and all that sort of stuff. So I won't rehash all the information. A lot of the information is on my website. That sort of made me doubt, whether it was as deadly as it was. But even if it was a more dangerous disease than the seasonal flu, I thought the fact that the government could stop you from going out and stop you from gathering as a church or going out for whatever reason you like, having that freedom of movement was already an infringement on rights, on our God-given rights. So that's what sort of moved me to do something, because when that happened, and it feels like quite a long time ago now, when you said 29th of March, it's like, feels like a long time ago. I think when it first crept into my life was when it actually hindered us from meeting as a church. So that's when we started deciding, hey, what were we going to do? How were we going to respond to that? And that's what sort of sparked the idea to, exercise with a sign and express the opposition. And hopefully that would encourage others to speak up as well.
And when you reflect on it, it's particularly egregious and outrageous that we need an excuse to be outside the home. That probably the Victoria Police were out in force here in my state during the Easter long weekend, where they really had a blitz. And to me, it was just like that you could get pulled over by the police, not for any type of infringement or anything, but they just suspected you were out of the home for what they deemed to be, what they wanted to check that you were out for non-essential reasons. I think we've lost Victor there for a moment. Certainly not a problem on my end.
That on my feed?
Yeah, that was your end.
Oh, it's my feed, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I was just having a bit of a rant about.
Sorry, I missed all of that.
Yeah, I was just having a rant about the outrageousness that we needed to provide the state with an excuse or why we were outside of our home. Like, I'd never thought that would happen in our society.
Yeah, neither did I. I mean, I completely agree with you. I'm completely against the lockdown. I think everybody should have the freedom to decide what risks they take. So if they want to take the risk and go out, they should be able to. But see, if somebody wants to close their business down because they're concerned, they have the right to do that. But when somebody says that their business needs to close down to protect everybody else, that's an infringement on their right to work and their right freedom of movement. And yeah, absolutely. I think I completely agree with you. I'm completely against the draconian lockdown.
Now, your church, I'll just bring it up on the screen here. Do a screen share. The church in Liverpool, and you've got here a COVID update from the 20th of May. Due to the current restrictions in place, we're currently gathering in a home with limited space. Therefore, we have only opened these meetings up to existing members. Once public gatherings in the hall we rent is permitted again, we'll be opening back up our meetings to the general public. So you, as yet, can't hold your church meetings or practice your religion as well. You've been able to in Australia since its existence.
Yeah, exactly. And we actually have a constitutional right to do it. I mean, I didn't realize until recently, but section, I think it's 116 or 117 of the Constitution is actually a right that is legally protected in Australia.
It's actually, we don't I'm just going to, sorry, pull you up there. It's that there's no religious test to have any sort of government position of that. It's not a strictly a right to freedom of religion. That's another reason why the government has been able to steamroll our rights. We do basically have no rights in the Constitution.
Oh, really? Because the way it's worded, it says that it can't prohibit the free exercise of a religion either. I don't know if... well,
let's look it up.
I've got here right next to me, actually.
All right.
116. You may be right. I'm not a constitutional lawyer by any stretch of the imagination. But the way I read it, it says here, Section 116, Commonwealth not to legislate in respect of religion. The Commonwealth shall not make any law for establishing any religion or for imposing any religious observance, or for prohibiting the free exercise of any religion, and no religious test shall be required as a qualification for any office or public trust under the Commonwealth. So you're sort of alluding to the second half, but the first half is saying it sounds like a bit like the First Amendment in the United States Bill of Rights, right? Don't establish any religion, you can't force people to observe any religion, and you can't prohibit the free exercise of one. So do you read it that way, or do you understand it differently?
Well, maybe you should see if you can launch your own High Court challenge to the church closures, because, well, as we've come to know, guessing what the High Court is going to rule, it's a mugs game, and we know that there's those two High Court cases, one by Clive Palmer, one facilitated by Pauline Hanson to challenge Queensland and WA border
I heard
closures.
About those, yeah.
I noticed you had the Constitution right in front of you there.
No, because what happened, I didn't have it there specifically for this chat. It's because somebody had sent me a message and they said, hey, you can buy these Australian constitutions for $2 from Parliament House. So I bought like a bunch of them for my church members. And so I just happened to have one sitting right next to me. So it was because we were... I don't know who had pointed it out to me. I was looking at knowyourrightsgroup.com.au. So Mike Palmer does a lot of good work there. And I think one of my mates had bought his Know Your Rights book. And in there, it talks about different sections. So I was researching just recently, because of these lockdowns, like what our rights were in Australia, because I know we don't have a Bill of Rights. We have certain rights that are actually mentioned in our Constitution. And then we have implied rights, but we don't have all the rights that, say, America have legally protect, because we don't have a Bill of Rights. Not many
individual rights, is to be specific.
Yeah, so one thing I found interesting in it was, wow, the freedom to exercise a religion is actually stated as one of the sections in the Constitution. So that was like even a stronger case for how can they shut down places of worship when that's plainly stated in the Australian Constitution, which is meant to be the highest law in the land. So the reason why we're not able to meet in our building is because we rent a community centre, and because obviously that building does not belong to us. I can't just use it when I like. That they have actually closed down the community centre. So I don't know if in 2 weeks' time that's actually going to change. Maybe they'll open it back up. But the community centre we rent, because of the social distancing rules, it's limited to I think 36, even though normally it holds 80 to 100. So I still don't know what's going to happen even when it opens up anyway, and how the council's going to go about that. So does that answer your question? I don't know. I can't remember what your question was.
Yeah, it does. Would you like to build a proper church for your congregation to meet, one that you own and operate?
Well, a proper building. So a church is a congregation of people. So I know most people think of a church as a building, but I mean, obviously one day if our church has the funds and we have the means to be able to have our own building, But I think that that's just for every church to weigh up whether or not that's the best use of their finances. So our church is quite small. We've only got it like, less than 10,000 in the bank. So it's not like we have a ton of money. So.
And I know that Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister, on social media and in a lot of the left-wing press, he's mocked for his Pentecostal religion called a happy clapper. Of course, he has attended Hillsong conferences. Yet under his Prime Ministership, he has shut down all places of worship.
Yeah, I know. I mean, what can you say about that, eh? I mean, you would think that a prime minister that is supposedly a devoted Christian himself would do all he can to, promote the freedom of religion in our country. But, I mean, I don't know. Obviously people can believe what they want about Scott Morrison. Is he sincere or not? I mean, I think as a politician, he's got to play both sides. He probably weighed up in his own head what would be more politically expedient, whether to go with the medical advice and shut down our freedoms and everything like that. And judging from the response from most of Australians, I mean, you and I would probably be in the minority. So I would think that somebody like Scott Morrison would know what he's doing. I mean, he didn't get the top job because he's an idiot, right? So I think he knows how to sort of scope the political climate. And unfortunately, it seems that either he is not, either I'm misinterpreting the Constitution wrongly, or he's gotten some bad advice and he has done something that is infringed upon our rights. You would hope to think that he did it ignorantly, but it's a bit hard to believe that somebody of that clout would do something ignorantly. They know exactly what they're doing. Whether they are well-intentioned or not is to be seen.
When did you decide to launch Exercising My Rights? Because you've got the t-shirts, you've got the website and the logo. That's no overnight job. It takes a lot of planning and that. And I'm not sure if this is your first foray into activism. Obviously, you've gained quite a following on social media. A lot of people, I think they just admire your courage to just go out there, and you always have, and I think this is what annoys people who support the lockdown, is that you've always got a smile on your face. It's called the killer smile. So when did you decide this is something you wanted to put your energy into? And obviously you've got a wife and 6 children. That's a very large family. You're only 33.
34.
So you've had already achieved quite a bit in your short life. Obviously, you need to have their support as well to do this. So just talk us through the thinking the idea and then implementing it.
Okay, sure. In terms of my smile, I think this is just my natural demeanor. I'm the sort of person, when you're nervous, you smile, and I'm just always smiling. I remember my friends, when I used to preach in the United States, they would just say, "Stop smiling when you're preaching," even when I'm like preaching on serious topics. And it gets me into trouble sometimes. I mean, even it got me into trouble in a live stream where a dad, unfortunately, was sharing his vaccine injury story, and I was smiling as I do, just because I was concentrating on the live. And then he had shared actually a very sad story, and I had actually missed hearing it because of everything that was going along, and somebody had distracted me, and I got a bit of flack for that. So, of course, I felt terrible when I realized that it happened on the live stream later. But to go back to your question, I have our church is 5 years old, and unfortunately, I don't have anybody that is very good at websites and media and comms and all that sort of stuff. So I've had to learn all that myself over the past 5 years. So in terms of creating a website and creating a simple logo with the tools I have, I can bang that up pretty quickly together because I've had to create websites in the past for whatnot. So that's sort of an area that I'm a bit more well versed in, and I have some people to help me with that. So when the lockdown happened and we didn't really know what to do for church, so a few of the men got together. It was about 2 weeks after he had made that announcement, and we got together to decide, okay, what are we going to do? We had a few options. Do we do X? Do we do Y? So that conversation came to, well, we couldn't even, if we wanted to organize a protest, we couldn't even do that. I had participated in protests before. I am all for protests. Like I told you, I've been to a few before. I went to the abortion rallies and marches as well. So the discussion kind of went, well, we can't even protest because that's illegal. And then we sort of talked about, well, are we allowed to do under the law? So the conversation kind of led one to another, saying, well, technically, you can travel anywhere to exercise. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, and then the conversation was, well, does the law restrict you from what you can wear when you exercise? Well, no. Well, maybe we'll wear like a shirt with a message on it. And then it was like, well, does the law restrict you from carrying anything when you exercise? Well, no, because I mean, you can carry exercise equipment, you can dress however you want. So that's what sort of sparked the idea of, well, I'll go out and I'll exercise and I'll carry a sign and that'll be my exercise equipment. And then I'll have a reasonable excuse to leave my home. So one thing kind of led to another where we were joking, you know, when you, as you do, and a bunch of friends, when you're just throwing wild ideas out there, it's like, oh, let's call it exercising my rights, and let's try and get people to dress up in their exercise gear, and you know, we'll have an icon, right? The icon is going to be this headband. It's so obvious that I'm like, you know, this sweatband with Liberty on it. So these ideas just were starting to flow, and we were joking about different exercises. So that's where the idea of Liberty lunges came from. So the idea actually happened quite quickly. So that us getting together, thinking of the idea, creating the website, making the shirt, getting the headband, this all happened within a week. So it was like, I think we had met like on a Monday night, and then we're like, hey, this is the idea. I floated it with a few people, and then we said, okay, am I going to do this? Are you guys behind me? And then we're like, let's do it. So we got a website together. I just banged a logo together, and we created the social media accounts. The first Saturday, nobody knew the first Saturday we were going, right? Because we went the first Saturday just to scope it out and see if the police would give me any trouble. So I went with one other guy, because you can exercise with one other person. So that's where you see that first video that we created, where it's just us going around the city doing it. So we just came up with this idea, all right, we'll go around the city, we'll tape some funny exercises and put a video together, and then use that video and the one I had created at my home to sort of tell people what the idea was, to just get the word out and see if people would do the same. And that's how it happened. So it did require some planning, but it all happened quite quickly, or within maybe 3 or 4 days.
Before you started this, were you already a fitness fanatic? I mean, you look fit, but has exercise been something that you did quite frequently previously?
Well, I've always been active in my life. I mean, probably in the last 5 years, I've been less active because I got like a desk job, and with a family, you don't have as much time. So, you know, I did play soccer every now and then, and I was starting to get into jiu-jitsu. But, as I've just always been blessed with struggling to put on weight. So, you know, where some people struggle to keep weight off, I've always been somebody that's always been skinny. Like, and it's kind of been a blessing to me, because now that I'm 34 years old, I just look normal. But when I was like 18, 19, 20, I was, you know, I'd be like this scrawny little Asian boy. So it's funny how when you're Asian, you know, you got the scrawny genes and you got the young genes, but then when you're 34, it works out good for you, right? You got the eternal youth.
Yeah, Asians, they age later or age better. That's the stereotype. One of our questioners has asked, have you done kung fu fighting?
No, actually. So, but I don't need to. I mean, it's in my blood, right? That's just how it works. I don't need to. It's just an instinct. But my wife and I always joke that, you know, because she's like half Mexican and half Latino and a whole mix of breeds in from Mexico, that, you know, she'll be old and white haired and everything, and I'll still look like a teenager. But no, I don't do any martial arts. I wanted to get into jiu-jitsu, but just when I got my gi and I was just about to start, they closed the gym down because of the lockdowns.
Now, you were born and raised in Australia. One of the things that the mainstream media has tried to amplify, and there sadly have been some instances of public vilification of Asian Australians. Have you had any of that firsthand?
I don't know. I haven't had anybody sort of yell at me. And so I do sometimes wonder when, when I go to the shops by myself and I'm buying like a lot of things because I've got a big family. I wonder whether, do people think I'm like this Asian guy that's hoarding and I'm going to ship it off to China. But it was funny because when we were actually talking about, speaking out against the lockdown, that did sort of come up in conversation where it's like very funny that I'm actually an Asian born Australian. I look Asian. I'm as far from Asian as you can imagine. They call us bananas, right? Where you're yellow on the outside and white on the inside. Because I was born and raised here, I had Australian friends growing up. So whilst my parents have an Asian culture, I'm very much Australian. So we did joke about that, and I think that just what made the situation even more perfect, right? Because if I was maybe just somebody that was just like a white Australian male, then they'll play the race card, and then if they say it was because you're Chinese, well, I'm an Australian-born Chinese. If they say you're racist, if I was my exercise partner was another Chinese person, they'd be like, oh, that's why they're against. But my exercise partner is like a white English Australian, so it was just funny. It was almost like it was bulletproof. It was.
I think what is bamboozled the usual, as I call them, racebaiters, is that the anti-lockdown movement, or as I call them, the new freedom fighters. It's a broad section, dare I use the word diverse, section of Australians, and also diverse politically. I mean, not all of them are, as the expression goes, extreme far-right extremists. They're just people who woke up one day and found out they didn't have their rights anymore.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, I think that's why it's important to have single-issue causes, because it brings people together from all different backgrounds. And, yeah, like you said, there's plenty of different people that are there. The Millions March against mandatory vaccines, I think, was an event that was already planned, but I think it just became like a vaccine / anti-lockdown march just because of the timing, and also, I guess, my stuff naturally led up to that event. So, but yeah, when I talk to the people there's people from all walks of life, definitely.
Let's talk about week 5 of your exercise. That was on Mother's Day Eve, before the, as I mentioned in my introduction, the disgraceful Victoria Police shutdown and manhandling of the speakers and organisers at that rally outside Victoria's Parliament House. But on the Saturday, it was, and the video went viral when Rene Al Curry she was taken into custody by police with her young son standing silently with her protest sign. She wasn't exercising, which made her a much easier target. You were also arrested as well after several interactions with police. There's an edited version of that live on your YouTube channel, but especially the footage of Renee, because arresting a mother with a child, it distressed me seeing it. And there are a lot of people who said, why should she bring her child to that protest? But the fact that she was clearly practicing social distancing, and no one was at risk. I mean, if you're worried about catching the coronavirus, then stay locked down yourself. But it appeared to me that because the police saw you both as lockdown dissidents and knew how to assert your rights, and if you watch the footage, the police officers like, oh, you've got all of these political messages on your attire, and you're holding the sign. There's nothing in the public health order that says you're not allowed to wear political shirts when you're exercising. I saw that, what is it? They said you're not within the spirit of the legislation. Well, I didn't know that legislation had a spirit in it.
Yeah, so I'm not a legal professional. I mean, we just sort of looked at the laws and saw something we could use to do what we wanted to do. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't tell you what you can wear or what you can carry. I mean, once they can tell you what you can carry, are they going to specify certain exercise equipment that you can carry? But Renee actually, she was actually exercising. I mean, she was walking around just like I was. So she was, I mean, obviously when you go and exercise, you don't have to be constantly moving. So yeah, there were some times where she had stopped and was resting, or her son was playing on the fence or whatnot. But it was actually the police that stopped her, you know, like because the way, you know, I guess if people were doing the same thing I was, I mean, my plan was to go there and constantly be on the move. So we were pacing up and down Parliament House. So she definitely was exercising. Yeah.
I noticed in a video I saw of the UK anti-lockdown demonstrators in Hyde Park, when the police came over to them, they started doing the what do you call them when you do like that, outstretched like
star
a
jumps.
Yeah, star jumps. They started doing those, and I was sort of like nicely played. But the whole thing, and this is the thing, it's up to the discretion of the officers. It's subjective, which is not what law should be. It should be objective, and we still don't know whether all of the issuance of these fines were legal at all. They could be all ruled invalid. That's because the courts are clogged up at the moment. But the fact that it's the officer right there at the time, and we know that not all police officers, but some don't like, well, they think of somebody like you as a smart ass.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what's going to be the outcome of my court case, what's going to be the outcome of Renee's. Yeah, I agree with you that laws are there to prohibit what you can't do. If it doesn't plainly state it, then you have a right to do, you have freedom. But yeah, I mean, on that day, I mean, a lot of people give Renee a lot of hassle for bringing her son along, and one thing I think it's important for people to know is, if you were there on that day, you would realize how little people were there. I mean, when we're talking to Sergeant Davey, the group is kind of congregated there because he's talking to everyone and everyone's interested in what's going on. But when you're walking up and down Parliament House, I mean, that stretch of path is pretty long. I mean, people were quite spread out. There were plenty of times in the live when you look behind me in the live stream, there's nobody in front of Parliament House. And there was even less people in the city in week 5 than there was the few weeks later when the lockdowns started to ease, right? Because on that week 5, it was you technically still needed a reasonable excuse to go out, but the week after they couldn't do anything because the reasonable excuses weren't there anymore, because you could go out in groups of 10, right? So it wasn't just limited to people exercising in pairs anymore, and that's why I don't know whether by good fortune or good good planning the police didn't do anything, and because if they did, I think it would have blown up even more. Which is kind of like what I wanted them to do from the beginning, which is just to leave me alone and just go about my exercising. So, but one thing is, Renee had already spoken to a few police officers. See, when you see her getting arrested, that's actually the 4th encounter, because she speaks to a few constables to begin with. They question her and then leave her alone. And then she talks to Inspector O'Donnell. And I think that's when she's already decided, I'm going to arrest this woman, because she's kind of stood me up in front of all my constables. She then comes over and joins the group with Sergeant Davey, who also has a conversation with her and is fine to let her be and let us keep exercising. And it was actually when she left to go home, so she's actually leaving, that O'Donnell comes to get her. So, even if, O'Donnell wants to try and make a point that she didn't give me a name and blah, blah, I can arrest her for that. I mean, I think most of the public would think that you're not really using your discretion where there's no danger, there's nobody around, the woman's walking. Okay, she's got a sign expressing her dissent with the lockdown. She's on her way home, so she is leaving. And then you decide to drag her and throw her into the back of a car, and violently as well. I mean, they could have just detained her, let her calm down, explain to her what was going to happen, let her child sit in the car with her. and I guess ask her for some cooperation if they really wanted to push the point. But I don't think anybody can justify what they did in the way they did it. And to the people saying, "Oh, why did you bring your child along?" I mean, people bring their children along to protests all the time, protest-like events. And, people bring them to marches, people bring them to the climate march, people bring them to all sorts of things. And you do that because you don't expect it to get violent. You expect it to be a peaceful thing that you're doing. You shouldn't worry about like brutality from the police. So she just thought she was coming. And the fact that it was just a walk outside Parliament House, that's why she wanted to do it, because she told me she had never been to any protests before, other protests. So she came because it was just a walk and she didn't expect it to be violent. So to the people criticizing her for bringing her child, I think it's completely unjustified.
It seemed like they were doing what I call Cartman policing there, that you people there were not respecting our authority. Because
I guess, they can have, obviously that's a factor, but yeah.
Because I noticed in one of your interactions, because people are wearing your merchandise and they're saying, how can you be here just with one other person? Look, there's people dressed the same as you. And like, obviously they decided that they were inspired by you, but there seemed to be this underlying resentment that you'd started this movement.
Well, I think so. And I know they're in a rock and a hard place. And I suppose that's sort of the situation that we find ourselves in, that I am sort of keeping the law and finding a way to do something, staying within the law. So as much as they, and that's why it comes to a head, right? Because they know that, like it seems like something that would be illegal, but it's not. So it depends what stance they were going to take when they finally clashed with me. But just to correct you there, like it's not my merchandise, because I didn't sell them any. They made their own T-shirts, right? So it's if people make their own things, obviously it'll look the same. But I didn't sell it to them, and I specifically did that because I didn't want to be accused of organizing a group there, like most protests do, right? Most protests, they gather, they speak to the people, there's chants, they may be selling merchandise there. So my idea was, I will do this as an individual, and if other people want to do it as individuals in the same place as well, then that removes, then that should keep it within the confines of the public health order, which was the point I was trying to make. And that's why Renee is a different scenario to me, because she refused to give her details to the police. So because she refused to give her name and details, they had whether you agree with it or not, they had under New South Wales law a reason to arrest her and detain her to get her details, because they suspect her of breaking the COVID laws. But because I gave my name and my details, I wanted the discussion to be more about, am I breaking the public health order? So that's the discussion I wanted people to see if police made an issue of it. If they didn't, then it would hopefully encourage others to do the same.
There's a question here from Anxious Aussie, who created the edited video of Renee's incident that caused so much outrage, because there's normally sort of one, there was one bit of footage which did the rounds on the media and that. And as you said, it was her fourth encounter.
I don't think that was, I think the one that went viral wasn't edited. I think that was just one lady that was there that recorded it and then just shared it with a bunch of people she knew. And then it just spread like wildfire. I think a few people that have followers online shared that unedited footage, and then it went out. So I don't know if you're referring to my edit. So obviously the videos I have on my channel are edited by me. But
you still have the lives,
one that went viral
on your Facebook page.
Yep.
So you still do have the raw footage, but your YouTube channel, that's where you do the edits along with your commentary from where you are now.
Yeah. So I wasn't actually up close recording, because when Renee got arrested, I don't know if you remember, when Renee got arrested, they had set up a barricade, right? So that I couldn't actually get close. And when I tried to get closer to take some footage, that's when I got arrested. So the footage of Renee in my videos is obviously taken from other people, but it would be the people that are screaming and shouting around her while she was getting dragged into the back of the paddy wagon. It was one of those ladies' footage that went viral. That's what most people saw to begin with. Yeah, mine was later because, see, when that all happened, I did have a lot of media reach out to me, but I didn't really want to chat with anybody at that time because I wanted to tell my story first. So that's why I have obligations on Sundays with church, and then, it takes me a while to go through all the footage and edit it and stuff. So I think my cut didn't get out there until like maybe Wednesday or Thursday, which was explaining what had happened and the footage that people didn't see with the police.
You don't have the resources of the mainstream media who go back to the studio with their vans and then edit it for the 6 o'clock news. Don't have a team of 20 or whatever, but
Exactly.
their teams, as we've seen, are getting cut as well. Maybe if they didn't report so much fake news. And you mentioned you've been involved in activism before against abortion and same-sex marriage, so you would know the slant that the mainstream media puts on things. And they've treated the anti-lockdown movement, the lockdown dissidents, as irresponsible anti-science conspiracy theorists who, well, therefore they're not entitled to free speech or thought. Many who've attended the various protest rallies, they are a part of groups that are skeptical of vaccines and 5G telecommunications. You've done interviews with the Australian Vaccination Risks Network, which would see you labelled as an anti-vaxxer. It's something that a lot of people have said to me over the years about the Unshackled. You should talk about vaccines more. And my position is like, I don't know lots of details about what's in the vaccines, and because to research that yourself, but as a believer in liberty like yourself, like, you cannot forcibly inject somebody with anything against their will. You just can't do that. And that's what we've really seen with the no jab, no play for professional athletes in Queensland. It is still a legitimate grievance, I think. But on top of that, there's more to the lockdown dissidents than just those two issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how much government funding, Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 10 get. I mean, obviously, if they're government funded, then they should be completely neutral. But if it's in a free market, they can report it how they want, as long as it's not slanderous and libel. That's just up to more people that are liberty minded, or, if you have a left wing media, more right wing people need to get involved. And I think that was my message at the march against mandatory vaccinations is, if we just sit on the couch and just yell at the TV and complain and don't do anything about it, then we only have ourselves to blame. So we can't just complain about the media that's out there, but yet nobody on our side is in the media or creating competition in that market. So they're going to swing it their way. I guess we just have to fight back, with citizen journalists and independent journalists and whatnot. But yeah, all sorts of people come together. It has been painted as a more, anti-5G, anti-vaccine rally and whatnot. And it must be because obviously it peaked at that. And also, obviously, a lot of people who are against mandatory vaccinations are upset at this crisis being used to push that agenda. So I don't know whether they'll ever be able to make it mandatory, because that would be an infringement on people's rights. I mean, they'll try, I guess it hasn't stopped them before. But I know when I spoke to Merrill, it's like they can't sort of deny a child's school because Australia has signed up to the International Conventions of Human Rights, and you have a right to education. So whatever your position on that is, I think that's why they haven't gone that far yet. So that's why they're able to get away with no jab, pay, which is like government entitlements, and no jab, no play, because childcare centres fall under early learning. They don't fall under education. And obviously you don't have a right to government entitlement. So I still disagree that, people should be financially disincentivized, like, how you say, it's financially impacted in order to make them take some sort of medication. But, that's why they can get away with it without it being an infringement on human rights, because you can't claim a right to government entitlement. So they can just make your life extremely difficult. Whether that is a case for strong coercion, because I know consent must be absent from strong financial coercion. So I don't know if there's maybe some class action that's addressing that point.
It's called nudge politics, where you don't explicitly legislate against something, but you can nudge people, use the power of the authority of the state to sort of nudge people to do what you want them to do.
Yeah, so I think more of us who believe in liberty need to get involved in politics, so that, I like what the Liberal Democrats say. They say, libertarians want to get into government so they can leave you alone. I agree with that sort of overall mentality, even though we may disagree on little things here and there, on some policies here and there. But yeah, I mean, one thing I would like to say is, just because you talk to somebody and just because you're interviewed by somebody, that doesn't necessarily mean you agree with them 100%. I mean, you probably interview all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life, and people will say like, well, why would you interview this person, give them a platform? Why would you interview this people? I mean, because there are benefits to, utilizing each other's audiences and whatnot. But just because I'm interviewed by Meryl Dorey, that doesn't mean we agree 100%. I mean, I definitely agree with her stance of health freedom and her fight to maintain that freedom to decide, because they're not forcing people not to get vaccinated. If you want to get vaccinated, go ahead. So the fight is, if you don't want to get vaccinated, you should have the right to not get vaccinated. And the government shouldn't be using our tax dollars to, make it more incentivized for one person who decides that medical choice and another person that doesn't. So yeah, obviously when it gets into all the science of it and all the arguments there, I'm like you, I'm not an expert on it. Obviously I have my choice on what I've decided to do for my family. I don't vaccinate my family, but I just believe everybody should have the right to choose their own level of risk. If they want to vaccinate their children, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to. And if somebody is worried about catching some disease, then like with the coronavirus, they can stay home until they feel safe. And when you feel safe again, to let your children and yourself engage into society with all these scary unvaccinated people out there that, don't even have the disease you're worried about catching to begin with, then that's the risk you take. But you don't have a right to remove other people's rights. And it's very similar to vaccination, right? You don't have a right to remove somebody else's right because you're worried because they're unvaccinated. To keep you safe, you have to decide whether or not to take the risk to engage in society.
The lockdown lovies, as I call them, if you're enjoying the lockdown, you can keep yourself locked down. I mean, there's no law that says, there was no law before that said you had to go outside of your home. You can just stay there, and you have we have the e-commerce facilities so that you never have to go out to the shops or anything. You can just live as a recluse if you're scared of any form of human disease.
Get a job where you can work from home, and nowadays with VPNs, you can work from home, do everything you need to from home. I mean, most of us, even when we go to the office, we're sitting in front of a computer. And I think this is one thing businesses have realized. They're like, oh, we don't need everybody working in the office. We can have everyone operate from home. But obviously there's pros and cons to having people operate at home. But you're absolutely right. I mean, even if the kill rate or the mortality rate of the disease was a lot higher, let's say it was 20, 30, 40, 50%, you still don't have a right to restrict somebody's movement. They can decide whether or not they take the risk. And if they take the risk, they've obviously decided for themselves that the return was worth the risk. And most wise people, if there really was something out there that they were worried about, would stay home, right? So you don't have to force them to stay home anyway. But even if there was something out there and you decided to go out, the only people that should be out there are also the other people that are willing to take the risk. So I don't know what all these pro-lockdown people are worried about. If they're so worried and they're so for the lockdown, All the people that are worried and for the lockdown should be shut up in their homes anyway. I should never run into you at the shops. And why are you say, well, you're going to spread it to somebody that's going to spread it to me? Well, why are you letting somebody in your house that has been out and about in the big scary world, possibly catching coronavirus? I mean, if you're so worried, you should just quarantine yourself from anybody that's had interaction with anybody, and then you don't even have to worry. And then the people that are out and about, supposedly spreading it to each other and killing everybody, are the ones that are willing to take the risk. They're already out. The fact that they're out, they're willing to take the risk. So I just think there's no way you can really defend removing somebody's rights unless you just believe in an authoritarian government, and that you just believe that authoritarian government has the right to just tell people what to do in every area of their life.
Well, you're a Sydney sider. They shut down all of Sydney's nightlife because of two one-punch deaths. We've shut down basically the whole economy over, well, as it stands, 102 deaths. But that was a microcosm of what was to come. They've eventually lifted Sydney's lockout laws in the hope of returning Sydney's nightlife. You don't strike me as somebody who regularly goes to King's Cross on a Saturday night for a wild night.
I wouldn't be caught dead there.
Yeah, but you don't want to take away other people's rights if they want to go to King's Cross and have a fun night out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably where I'm a bit of a unique conservative, where I don't think drugs and alcohol and whatnot should be a criminal. I think people can have the right to, unfortunately, destroy their own body and live lifestyles that are detrimental to their health. So, yeah, it was funny because when all these lockdowns happened, somebody was telling me about the Sydney lockdowns, and I didn't even know, because I'm not originally from Sydney. I'm originally from Perth. So maybe I wasn't around when all the hoo-ha about the lockout laws were on. But even if I was, they probably never came across my desk because, me and the people that I associate with are not those sort of people that go out late at night and get drunk and have that sort of party lifestyle at this point in my life. I mean, I did when I was younger, obviously when I had different values back then. So, yeah, so I was not affected by those at all, and I didn't even realize something like that had happened. But I definitely am for liberty. If people want to do that, then they can. It's up to them. I wouldn't recommend it, but they have the freedom to, like I said, destroy their own health.
Well, I'm not a sporting shooter or a hunter, but I certainly respect and advocate for people's rights to engage in that activity. Just because, and this is the libertarian thing, just because you don't like something, it's not your cup of tea, doesn't mean that it has to be shut down, which is basically the position of these nanny status. And also with the because the government slogans have been "stay home, save lives." This simplistic four-word slogan, as a lot of political cynics call it, but there's been some discussion about the other health effects to people's lives and livelihoods of the economic shutdowns and lockdowns. Mental health, the fact that our hospitals had to be emptied because they were going to be flooded with coronavirus patients. Some haven't been able to go to their cancer treatments. We could be having more cancer deaths down the track. There's just been this a single focus, and if you bring up any of these other factors, then it's like, oh, you want people to die from coronavirus.
Right. I think your device is just disconnected, by the way.
Yeah, that's okay. You keep talking.
So, yeah, I mean, I agree with your sentiment. I think when people think about the benefits of lockdown, they're completely not thinking about the detriments of lockdown. And, when it comes to political slogans and all that sort of stuff, it's all marketing, isn't it? I mean, they're trying to say the save lives, so that it just makes everybody think that's the only way you can save lives is if you stay home and everything like that. And that's why my sign kind of played on that. So it's like, hey, well, you can save lives by ending the lockdown to try and help people understand, hey, there's lives on both sides. Like, just because it's not money versus lives, because money is a means to an end. Money, people that don't have a lot of money, like a bankrupt and poor society is also an unhealthy society that leads to, mental health and all sorts of things, not getting the required care. I mean, if we were not a prosperous nation, we wouldn't have the hospitals to even save people to begin with. So I think people are definitely understating the negative effects of the lockdown. And see, I take a big interest when it comes to the topics when it comes to economics. I just have really been interested in how economics works. I'm a big fan of Peter Schiff, and I listen to a lot of Milton Friedman, and I read the articles from the Mises Institute as well. I don't know if you pronounce it Mises. But,
yes.
That stuff really interests me. Yeah, that stuff just really interests me, like how government should work. And then when you start learning about all that stuff, you realize how far our government is from an ideal limited government situation. So when the lockdowns happen, I knew that there would be huge economic effects even before people are talking about it now. You can't just stop everyone from working and think that everything's just going to be, you just switch it back on, after, a month or 2 months or whatever. There's going to be huge ramifications. So I thought, at the time, like, I thought when we were going to go into lockdown, I honestly thought it would be like 2, 3, 4 weeks, because, when somebody comes from overseas, what are they quarantined for? 2 weeks. So why are we locked down for 3 months now almost, and we're getting on to 3 months. So, I didn't think it'd be easing off that much. So that's why, now that it's starting to ease off, my life is starting to go back to normal. So I don't know, next week I won't have the time on Saturdays anymore to keep on exercising at Parliament House, because now I've got to take my kids to soccer again. And so things are starting to get back to normal. But when I first started it, I didn't think it would be going for 8 weeks. I thought maybe a month tops.
Well, I'm not sure if you're also familiar with the work of Robert Higgs. He wrote the classic book Crisis in Leviathan, where he talks about the ratchet effect when there is a crisis such as this, and there's uncertainty, that people are in fear. The government implements a whole bunch of measures and programs, and this is going to be another challenge now, to roll back Job Seeker, Job Keeper, all of those measures and that. And this is what in Robert Higgs' books, he documents episodes in government growth in the United States, and you can apply it to Australia as well. And the reason they stay in a bigger and bigger government is because people don't exercise their rights. I mean, you really think that the government is just going to suddenly decide to give you your civil rights back? You're just going to sit on the couch and hope that, they'll know when the time is right to let you be out of the house or be close with somebody in public?
But see, this is the thing, right? I mean, who is the government? I mean, in a democracy, we are the government, right? Like, we have elected them in because they're the ones running for office. So often the problem is when people look at our politicians and they think, oh, what a bunch of scumbags or whatnot. Well, where are all the good people? See, the problem is a lot of good people are busy with their own. Like, a lot of good people don't get into politics, right? They don't play that game. And that's part of the problem, right? And even a lot of libertarians or anarchists, people that you talk to, they think that participating in the system is condoning of the system. But, we just happen to live in a democracy. This is the system we find ourselves in. We can't just sit back and complain who's in there, because if we do, we get the government we deserve because we are not doing anything to change it. So the only way we're going to be able to roll back these policies is if more people who are economically conservative, we need to get involved to push these policies. If we don't get involved, what's left? What's left is the left, right? That's left in politics. And you keep saying, oh, they're passing all these laws. Well, if we don't get involved, then there's no resistance at all. And that's why, I think people should be involved in one way or another. And it's funny because when I think about it, because Christians think the same way as well, and it frustrates me to no end. They think like the either like the atheist anarchists, where they just are so disgusted with the system that they don't participate. And the ironic thing is if all those people that thought that way actually participated, it might actually be a different world.
Yeah, well, the thing is that the left and the big government types, they have the media, the cultural institutions, a lot of the big corporations all behind them. Yeah, that doesn't excuse people on our side from getting involved, exercising their own rights, but it shows that it's not as simple as just getting more people involved. And this is why I started the Unshackled, to be a force against this, what I see as the mainstream media protection racket.
Well, absolutely. And we can get involved in all different sorts of ways. So like what you're doing is fighting against mainstream media. But yeah, it just means we have to fight harder. So, they may have the resources behind them, but ultimately in a democracy, it's a numbers game. So we fight harder. I mean, even if, I'm not expecting that we will take I know where this world is ending at the end game, but you know what? We shouldn't go down without a fight. So if it's the people that have the attitude of just giving up, they're making it worse faster. But if we don't know whether we might be on an uptick in history, right? Because history goes up and down in ebbs and flows. And who knows if we are part of the generation where we make a difference and we can at least uptick it and prolong the inevitable. Who knows how many more lives we might save if we are better economically, better socially as well. It'll be a very different society.
Well, there have been even periods in modern history when everyone thought the world was going to end and there was going to be anarchy worldwide, not the good anarcho-capitalist anarchy, but the lawlessness barbarian one. But the good times return. This is just life in society is volatile, and that's what I'm going to get into the second half with the riots and the civil unrest in the United States. How does it make you feel that you've experienced harassment by the police, and obviously these anti-lockdown rallies, they've had the police monitoring them, almost trying to bait them into reacting. Yet this week, a lot of them, they were lockdown lovies a week ago, but now they want to get out on the streets and import Black Lives Matter rallies. And I know that our Victoria Police, imagine my shock, has simply rolled over saying, "Oh, we don't want it to be, violent." Victoria Police were there, given that the double standard has been exposed since our Police Minister Lisa Neville said they probably won't be issued fines. Victoria Police today have sort of said, people attending, think about the public health hazard you might be creating. But it's a stark double standard here.
Well, you don't expect people with, lower levels of integrity to be consistent. But at the same time, I mean, these I don't know what they're called. Are they called Black Lives Matter protests? They're happening at a different time during the lockdown as well. Because if you think about it, I mean, we didn't get, in Sydney anyway, at the Saturday rally, that protest didn't get any hassle from the police. I mean, they were also saying, hey, keep social distancing and everything, and they're just doing their job, right? Because I'm sure they have to be seen encouraging groups of 10 and social distancing, but at the same time, they didn't cause any trouble on Saturday at all. I mean, they were there protecting people's right to protest. So I think, I was doing it at a different time. So that put them in between a rock and a hard place, what I was doing as an individual. So I can imagine that the media and maybe people would be sympathetic to the cause, because it's a cause that the media loves, right? They love the racial stuff, anything that fuels racial debate. So maybe that's why they're for it, and it's just a different time. So I don't know how much of it is an agenda and how much of it is, well, we're at a different time of the lockdown as well, where different things are acceptable. Because even I read an article just recently where it's saying, oh, Victoria's not going to fine the people. But even within the article, I mean, the police commissioner in Victoria is still telling them that you should be in groups of 10
Well,
and everything, which is pretty much what happened at the Sydney protest on Saturday. So I don't think it's necessarily the police treating them different. I mean, when it comes to the issue itself, I mean, I'm completely against. I don't even think there's such thing as races. You know, we're all made of one blood, the Bible says, and you know, the difference between you, me, and a black person is just the density of the pigment in our skin. You know, where there's one race, it's the human race. So the people that are, you know, the people that are pushing rights for a race are actually the racists because they're recognizing that races even exist. You know, so if there's no difference between you and me, it's just the amount of pigment in our skin. To say Black Lives Matter, that person's being racist because why? What makes somebody black?
It's
you know?
all very
It's just
confusing.
Yeah, that's why, you know, all lives matter. You know, to me,
how come they're not holding, what is it, Asian Respectmatters since
where's the yellow lives matter?
the camera's
So,
gone out again here.
Okay.
I'll read
so
this.
silly
Yeah.
that
Here we go.
and that's what I hate about, you know, this sort of social responsibility, this sort of push for making everybody equal, and then it just makes everybody unequal. Like I hate the fact that companies are forced to, you know, have, you know, gender quotas and, you know, do things for Aboriginals. They don't do it for anybody else. So I'm not against if people want to do that, but it just to do it in the name of equality, it just doesn't make sense that you do it in the name of equality, but then you only do it for one religion, or you only do it for one race, or you only do it for one gender. You know, if it's going to be equal and you're going to have an Aboriginal Appreciation Day, well, then have also a Chinese. Why don't just have a day where you appreciate all cultures? It's like you want to do it equal, but then you only do it for one culture. That doesn't make sense.
The famous Animal Farm saying some animals are more equal than others. Just to finish off, we have got a super chat. Senator Slayer, US $3. How many Chinese spies are operating in Australia? What is their main objective? Are they close to the Labor Party? You certainly don't strike me as a CCP spy if you're advocating freedom and liberty, but I do know that the CCP, they do harass Australian Chinese who have family members back in China.
Do they? Yeah, I wouldn't know. I mean, my family is Malaysian Chinese, so even my family's not connected really with the Chinese at all. So I don't know much about it, and I've lived here my whole life. But you know, if somebody's going to think that I'm some CCP infiltrator, I mean, when it comes to people that are convinced of one narrative, it doesn't matter what you say, they're always going to think that of you. I'm sure you get the same thing, right? Maybe you're like a controlled opposition. I'm sure you'll get that one day.
It's the previous thing with, what is it, Russiagate, that all the pro-Trump alternative media was all funded by Russia. That's that was sort of the slur against us.
That's why even with this exercising my rights thing, and people ask, "Oh, why the lockdown?" Yeah, I make my argument. It doesn't matter why they're pushing the lockdown. It could be: is it a conspiracy? Is it that it's authoritarian control? Is it that they're just misguided? Is it just that people genuinely believe that they are doing good by getting everyone to lock down? But it doesn't matter what the agenda is, because where I'm arguing it from, it doesn't matter why you want to do it. What you're doing is wrong. So, you know, how you read the road to hell, they say, is paved with good intentions. So people can have the best intentions in the world, but that doesn't mean what you're doing is actually morally right. So you don't have the right to remove my rights just because you're scared or whatever agenda you have. So I think if we come at it from that angle, that is the strongest argument. And then we don't get caught up into the, you know, it's because they wanted to roll out 5G, and it's because and I'm not saying I agree with all these theories, but when you get caught up in all the theories, then you just got to decide how you're going to argue it, because I feel that the way I'm trying to take a stand is a bit more bulletproof than bringing in something that you can't necessarily justify.
So what's the plan for the future now? It'll be week 9. If you're going out again this Saturday, you're just gonna keep this rights exercising going. I know that Fanos, who I mentioned in my introduction, the Victoria Police issued him with a a statement which was sort of said your security license is under review. He's a security guard, so they've basically taken away his livelihood. So he's sort of wanting to just focus on activism now. But obviously, you've got your church and your congregation and your family as well. Even though you've all met through this, you came to this as individuals. So obviously you've got different sort of goals for the future in mind.
Yeah, I actually don't know Fanis at all. I've never spoken to him. I've never met him. So, you know, it's funny. This article came out that there's all these leaders of these wild protests, and I have no idea who these people are. I've never met them, and I've never talked to them. But I'm one of the masterminds, it seems. But yeah, plans moving forward. I mean, that's why next week things are already easing up. My kids' classes are on again, so I have to take them. So unfortunately, I will no longer be exercising on Saturdays, but that doesn't mean I'm bowing out of the fight. The Smoke and Joe McHale from Save the World Army and Garth, who was wearing the bandana and had a Vendetta t-shirt, he was the guy on Channel 7 News with the exercising for police state sign. They asked if they could carry the torch in my absence, so they're going to keep going there every Saturday, exercising and encourage people to go. So if you're free and you're able to, you know, you can go. What I was finding that, you know, it sort of turned into a place where you can kind of network with like-minded people. So it was kind of nice just going there and it being like a spot where you would run into other people that had similar thoughts to you and just walk up and down and have a chat. That's what I was kind of enjoying in the last 8 weeks. But moving forward, there's still the updates for the court case to tell people about. So I plan on using this channel just to keep sharing information, to give people updates about my court case as it rolls out, and also Renee's court case as well. And also, I might use it as well to attend other rallies and events that I can find I'm able to go to and continue doing the live stream. So I can go there and talk to people and take people along, sort of tagging along with me through that live stream avenue. I think people were enjoying that.
It's funny how when the government takes people's rights away, there's a whole new generation of activists who rise up and challenge the state's power. It's funny how that works.
I know, and that's why I think they would be a bit wiser about it. I mean, you know, there's the whole, 1984 versus Brave New World, right? People always sort of compare those two. I would think the government would be smart about it and they'd go the Brave New World route, right? Because the Brave New World is just keep people entertained. See, that's the problem, is that people were so busy with life, like I was as well, and then you shut everything down, and now people are at home brewing like, how do I get back at what they've just done to me? And, you know, that's sort of the oppression that comes, and it makes people rise up. So, you know, if I was an oppressive government, I would probably go that route. But I don't know. Maybe they haven't learned their lesson yet to do it a bit of a more subtle way.
Well, we've run out of time. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you, Victor. Congratulations on your activism and really making a difference. Hopefully in the near future I can get up to Sydney and shake your hand, have that physical contact. It'd be great.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. Thanks for having me on.
Take care.
See ya.
Victor Tey there. And yeah, we have to give credence to him because he was one of the people that is standing up for our rights when a lot of other people are just staying at home. Now, I've got for the rest of the show, I'm going to do a summary of the US riots and looting and civil unrest that is now in its eighth night. I'm going to bring in Joel Jammal. He's been on this show before and also on the Unshackled. I'll just see if he's on at the moment. But yeah, the reason why I want to have Joel on for a little bit, just because he's always probably the most I would say most sort of calm analyzer of what's in the news at the moment. It's just coming on now. Joel, are you there? No, none of it's coming on. But I'll just wait until see if he can come on. Oh, I think he's here. One of them's worked.
Hello. Can
Hello,
you hear
Joel. Yeah, I can hear you and see you now. Come on the screen.
Beautiful. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. And we are going to be simulcasting this segment with Joel on New South Welshman against the extreme left. So I'll just get that up now. And I'll just change the name on the graphic to reflect your name.
Awesome.
Yeah. So you saw that I just interviewed Victor Tey.
That's right.
Have
Yeah.
you been a follower of his weekly Saturday rights exercising?
Yeah, I did. I've actually been following him a little bit on the side. He's certainly stirring the pot a bit, isn't he?
Yeah, just by wanting to get out and get some exercise, and exercise some political speech as well.
It certainly seems like people really need to get behind him, because it can be very daunting out there on your own when the waves are hitting you like that.
I'm just trying to start this broadcast. I don't think it's gonna. Is it? I don't think it's going to work, Joel. Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah.
No worries.
The live. Now, your Facebook profile, most of the posts are public, so if they, even if they're not your Facebook friend, they can still follow you and get your posts on your feed. In my interview with Victor, I alluded to the civil unrest happening throughout the United States and the attempts by the far left to import it here. This was all triggered by the death on the 25th of May by a 45-year-old African-American man, George Floyd, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is a Midwest state near the Great Lakes, near Michigan and Illinois. It's a solidly Democratic state. It has it's voted for the Democrat presidential candidate, I think, at least last 5 elections.
That's right.
Has a Democrat governor and a Democrat mayor. The head of the local police department is a Democrat, so is the district attorney. And everyone's seen the footage that police officer had his foot on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes, and including 2 minutes after he lost consciousness. It's pretty, your blood boils
Insane.
watching it.
Yeah.
And there were peaceful protests, justified, but have now turned into nationwide rioting, looting, and acts of unprovoked assaults, where some have actually been bashed to death. Now, as I was just telling my audience, you're the most reflective and considered commentator that I know and I've had on the show. I might sort of get a bit loose here, I feel, but this senseless violence and the fact that it is excused by the far left activists, a lot of it is glorified by the mainstream media. You have the Hollywood celebs wanting to bail out the rioters. You have social media companies like Twitter not hiding the tweets or deleting the accounts of those who are organizing these acts of violence, but by the President of the United States restricting his tweets, and the fact that all the people or endorsing the looting and rioting and violence, they were the same people as saying that, well, basically they wanted the house arrest for the coronavirus to last forever, and were calling the anti-lockdown peaceful protesters the most irresponsible people. It is just like, it's obvious now more than ever that everything is just upside down and logic just does no longer exist.
Yeah, look, they're getting, it seems like the perhaps left-leaning elites in the US, they're getting very desperate right now. I mean, to go back to the start, I mean, there have been a lot of things they've tried to throw at the nation to bring it down, particularly Trump, because it all reflects badly on him. And it seems to me that Russiagate didn't work, Ukrainegate didn't work, or Russiagate 2.0. And on top of that, the pandemic didn't work, which is why they were so willing to throw out to the side. So they've jumped on board with this. I mean, it's an issue that's been boiling for a while, but they really hopped on board with it this time around. And just to give people a timeline, Tim, just because a lot of people I know that will be watching this don't actually know what happened. So I think it was on, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was on the Friday, I think it was last Thursday, George Floyd ended up getting, he died. This police officer, racist police officer, who had committed multiple offences before 2007 and wasn't prosecuted by Democrats, by the way.
And including Amy Klobuchar, who was a prosecutor in that state and ran for the Democratic nomination for president.
Well, no, actually, I thought that originally, and there was an element of truth to that. But once I dug into it a little bit more, it turns out that she actually, I think, became a senator or a member. Yeah, I think she became a senator a year before that. So she wasn't actually the prosecutor at that time in 2007 when he was meant to be prosecuted. But it ended up going to a grand jury where I don't think he got convicted of that. But the point of the matter is that the reason I bring Democrat up at all is to show that they're railing against systematic racism. That place has been like Democrat run for decades. You're going to have to point that out to me, including 8 years of Obama. Let's not forget. So when you've got, Democrat governors of the state, Democrat, mayors that have come out and I would say stoked a lot of the fear in Minneapolis, where a lot of this broke out. And you can't really lay this at the feet of Donald Trump while he's been in office for 3 years. So painting this picture, we had these riots happen because this man had been killed, murdered, I would say, because that's what the charge is. And this police officer, he wasn't fired straight away. He wasn't charged straight away. And naturally, there were, as they usually are, there were protests, and I use that word advisedly, on the Friday and the Saturday. And I do believe on the Saturday, that's when it sort of switched over. And what we saw was these Black Lives Matter protests get infiltrated by Antifa, the anti-fascist group that dates back to the
predominantly white, overwhelmingly white organization, we should say.
It is, yeah. It's very much a white organization. And this group is dedicated fundamentally to a Marxist sort of communist sort of ideology. And the idea behind this group is to pretty much, they're not anarchists. A lot of people use the word anarchist. They're not anarchists. They are people who are just trying to tear the system down and remake it in the image that they would like to happen. Now, there's a lot of similarities between this group and white supremacists, believe it or not, but we can go there another day. But
I know that they've tried to claim that there's white supremacist agitators in these riots. There is zero evidence of that. There is countless, endless proof of Antifa organizing it. And of course, none of their Twitter accounts have been suspended. Maybe a few, but not the big ones.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen evidence that a lot of the right-wing factions in America have been working with Antifa in America. And it's just a matter of catching them, because a lot of these sources, they don't want to get given up, because then once these journalists give up their source, they no longer have their source. And look, there's definitely something going on. It needs more investigation over there. But they have been ruled a terrorist group by Donald Trump, I think, on Monday. And I'd strongly recommend Scott Morrison look into doing something like this similarly.
How come no mainstream media journalists, like if they were actually proper journalists, why aren't they asking Scott Morrison or Peter Dutton, are you going to get ASIO to classify Antifa as a terrorist organization here? That's what should happen.
Well, first of all, they're definitely not as big of a risk here naturally. I mean, they're actually doing some real damage over there and getting people killed, exactly killed.
Well, if you look at the pro-Antifa Twitter feeds in Australia, some have names to them, some are anonymous accounts. They basically excusing all of the violence there, which is normally, if that was, say, if that was a far right Twitter account in Australia or endorsing far right terrorism in another country, Twitter and the authorities would come down hard immediately.
No, absolutely. I mean, if you look at it in America, they'll go a step further. They'll cancel bank accounts of people who they accuse of being alt-right, and I know that happened to one of the Proud Boys in America. Now, these Antifa types, they pretty much infiltrated these marches, these Black Lives Matter marches, who have been peaceful marches for the most part, and they just slowly devolved over the weekend into some absolutely horrific disasters. And the footage that's come out of this, I don't even know how Facebook and YouTube have allowed some of them on their platforms, and Twitter especially, but I've been uploading as much of it to my Facebook account as possible. So there's a very good stream of news on there if you want to get it from somewhere else, where I've uploaded everything I can find. I've corrected myself where I've misstated things, like the Amy Klobuchar thing. I actually got that wrong, but I corrected it.
Yeah,
but,
you're definitely I would say underutilized, Joel, because you actually keep a record of all of this, which is another reason why it's good to have you on, because you've got a lot of this down your Facebook feed. It's full of, I use it for my own research sometimes.
Yeah, well, I definitely think it's worth it going through it. I mean, every now and then I do scroll through to see how many people. I never really reflect on how many people are liking the posts, but I do sometimes go through it, because it's also sort of a diary for myself, because I do chuck a lot of mental notes in there, and I do put a lot of effort into some of the posts to put my thoughts down on paper, because I often come back to it and say, see, I told you so. This happened. And so, look, a lot of this stuff, it's no surprise to you and me, Tim, because we've sort of had our finger on the pulse with Antifa for many, many years. In fact, I put it in some of my posts that Antifa, back in 2017, 3 years ago, caused like at least $3 million damage in Berkeley, when they had, I think it was Ben Shapiro and
it was Milo Yiannopoulos. Yeah, I remember that. That was insane. There was fires and that, of course, Berkeley, one of the hotspots of Antifa violence. Of course, the capital and birthplace of the modern Antifa movement is Portland, Oregon, where, well, I know that in the past they've accused the Proud Boys of provoking Antifa violence, because they held a end domestic terror rally in Portland, Oregon, but without any provocation. Normally they have the city all to themselves. They're burning down their own city, Antifa. And do you really think that the Antifa types have the sort of physical skills to rebuild their city?
Well, that's the important thing. I definitely don't think they are. I think a lot of them are the derelicts of society. They just need a purpose. They're without a religion. And the problem is that, I've got to stop you there, Tim. With these marches, and often with these Portland marches that we've seen in the past that you and I are very familiar with, it can often get up to 80% of the people in these protests are not from these areas. Now, when I say that, I don't mean 80% of the people in the march or the protest. I'm talking about 80% of the people that are arrested which is phenomenal. In fact, some places, I think in Minneapolis, the police chief came out, and you can all check this out on my wall. Police chief came out and he actually said every person we arrested last night was all from out of town. Now, what does that tell you? What does that tell you about the people ruining the businesses there, people that won't have to ever pay back or do anything to sort of help the community because it's not their community. They don't care.
Yeah, it's certainly opportunistic, and we've seen that a lot of organized crime has taken advantage of the looting. You've seen the pickup trucks outside of mega stores loading things up, and you see all this vandalism and burning down of places, and you'll see it burn down and get destroyed, but you can guarantee that the media, they won't focus much on the rebuilding efforts. People have got to rebuild that.
It's absolutely insane. It's insane. I mean, I just posted just today a video of a couple that just got beat up outside the front of their store. First the wife, and then the husband comes out and says, "You just beat up my wife," and then they beat him up too. It's like, this is crazy. And you know what? It's scary to middle America, Tim. Let me give you a statistic. 6 million Americans have bought guns in the last 3 months. 40% of those are first-time buyers of the guns. They've never owned a gun in their life. In fact, some of them actually railed against guns and more gun control. But due to COVID-19 and the food shortages, which were developing really badly, and also these attacks, it's gotten worse. And in fact, 40% of that 40%, so we're looking at around about 1.1 million of those 6 million gun owners, they're women. Now, I'd like to see the feminists come out and rail against this. That's 1.1 million women who are defending themselves at home against rapes, getting robbed, their kids, protecting them. Like, what more empowerment would you rather see?
There's an extreme amount of irony with these riots and looting as well. I coined the term on your Facebook post that it's no longer go woke, go broke. It's go woke, get looted, because we saw Target get looted in the past. They've virtue signaled a diversity. Same as Nike, they did the Colin Kaepernick ad, believe in something even if it means sacrificing everything. Well, you've sacrificed a lot of the stock in your stores. It hasn't stopped you getting looted. And we've seen there's multiple footage of people when they're not just business looting, but also home invasions as well. They're saying, "But I'm on your side." These people are savages. They don't care. And these celebrities who are promising to bail out these looters and rioters, it'd be a different story if they came to their mansions.
Absolutely. No, I mean, many of the looters are actually, they start in the inner city, and they actually end up going to some of the wealthy suburbs. And when they did, there's some great tweets. I reposted one today of a wealthy, snooty elite saying, "Burn it all down," when he saw them burning Minneapolis and some of the buildings there. And then the next tweet, which is like a couple of days later, he says, "Oh no, they're burning down my neighboring closed off community. Go burn the poor people's places." He literally said that. Isn't that crazy and snooty, and everything that a lot of the leftists are actually against? It's crazy.
It sort of reminds me of the thing in inner Melbourne where a lot of the lefties have this land belongs to the Wurundjeri people. Sovereignty was never ceded, always was, always will be Aboriginal land, but they'll never allow a local Aboriginal person to stay on their land. I remember years back, John Safran did that, had a tribe of Wurundjeri people turn up to like a few of those people who had those signs, and it didn't, the signs were, they weren't as applicable as the people putting out meant them to be.
Look, it's pretty insane, to be honest. I think that one of the crazy things about these riots that have been going on and how they've turned particularly violent is the fact that there's so many people that are just ignoring the fact that there's black people that are going to get hurt everywhere. In fact, some have died. In fact, today, these last 24 hours, we heard about a number of black police force members and one police chief, who died defending his store. And he'd served on the force for 39 years. He was an old man with a family. And this footage got live streamed on Facebook of him getting gunned down. Well done. What did you all think was going to happen if, causing these riots and this division over decades? They all blame it on Trump for the division. For decades, they've been fostering this narrative. And the reality is, in 2019, only 9 black men actually died, unarmed black men, and actually got shot by police officers. 9. Now, it's a tragedy, but 9 out of 340 million people. That's what this is over? Really?
I'm not sure if you've ever read Ann Coulter's book, Mugged, which was released in 2012, which documents all this racial demagoguery and makes the point, and this was back in 2010. We know it got a whole lot worse in his second term, that race relations and racial tensions increased under the first black president. And remember that 2016, when Black Lives Matter was born, there was similar instances of civil unrest, and there were numerous examples of police brutality against unarmed African American men. And Trump, in 2016, he sold himself as the law and order candidate. Everyone sort of compared that election to the 1968 Richard Nixon's election, because there'd been 2 summers of rioting under the previous president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who he started his Great Society welfare program in 1965, signed the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act. But in 1967, the long hot summer, there were nationwide riots in 68 after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. There were also riots as well. And so Nixon was able to come in 68 and say, I'll restore order. And of course, it didn't happen immediately, like the same under Trump. But until this period of civil unrest, I was looking through the instances of race riots and civil unrest. There's a lot in the 60s and 70s. Under Reagan in the 80s, when the American dream was restored, there was hardly any. Obviously, in 92, the LA riots after Rodney King's beaters were acquitted, but then not a lot until Obama's presidency. It took a dip under Trump's presidency, but it's back this year. Coincidentally, an election year, and also not long after the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of people are saying that Trump's support in the black community is dwindling and he's increasing racial tension. But I would argue no. Trump's actually more than doubled his black voter base. More than doubled. Now, there's this saying, Tim, if black voters come out and vote 20% with Republicans, then every time the Democrats will always lose. There are some polls coming out with 27% of black voters coming out for Trump. I think this is a sleeper issue, Tim, and I think you would have seen some of my posts on this. I think this can really flick the election for Trump and be a winner.
I do follow Candace Owens. She's sort of the face of the Black Set movement from the Democrat Party, because even when they were the racist party for most of their time in the United States. It's only when they flipped with the Lyndon Johnson signing the Civil Rights Act in 64 and Voting Rights Act in 65 that they claimed, no, we were all for black people's rights now. But in all their since then, despite the fact that they virtue signal that they're the party for blacks now, even though they're the party of slavery and segregation. But if you look at all these cities that have been ruled by Democrats, had states that have had Democrat governors, African American blacks have done appallingly, and all that seems to have changed in the Democratic Party is just their messaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the no one wants to have a discussion about why this is happening, basically, because this whole debate about the police shootings, not only are we not discussing why the shootings take place, but we're also not discussing, because there are often a lot of black people are making the argument that reparations are due, that they're owed something from this society where there's no one alive that was a slave and there's no one alive that actually imposed slavery. In fact, even at the height of slavery, only 1.5% of the nation actually owned slaves. So we've got a problem here. We've got a problem. And I think only slaves were in the South as well, which is what sparked the whole North-South war. Mm. Now, the people need to have the difficult discussions, and the difficult discussions about why black people are in such poverty. You can leave racism at the door for 1 second if you can. If you can't, then this discussion is not for you. We will come to racism in a second, because we all agree that George Floyd's death was terrible. We were all united on that before things got heated on Saturday. Now, no one wants to discuss the problems of the black single motherhood rate, how fathers aren't sticking around. Why did that happen? The expansion of the welfare state, which has exacerbated that. In fact, before the welfare state got blown out of proportion, in the 60s, the black single motherhood rate was at 20%. It was actually lower than the white single motherhood rate.
In the 50s and 60s, their standards of living were increasing. That it's as people around today, they are not aware of that fact at all. And you're right. The correlation with, I mentioned the Great Society welfare programs, that was just the start of the modern welfare state.
And where is it at now? In the 60s and the 50s, about 20% single motherhood rate. Where's it at now? It's at 78% single motherhood rate. It's almost directly correlated with the expansion of the welfare state. And look, I haven't even touched on racism yet. There's a whole bunch of things we can talk about. In fact, one of the things includes the mass incarceration rate of that Democrats imposed, that people like Obama and Hillary imposed, and
Kamala Harris as well.
No, Kamala Harris as well. Don't even get me started on Kamala Harris. Now, I learned all of these arguments because I used to be on the left, Tim. You know this. I used to be on the left and I used to support Bernie in 2016. These arguments are solid. The Democrat Party has done nothing for the black community. And that is why a lot of them were propping up Bernie. They just got rid of Bernie. So all of these politicians, including Obama in his recent article, saying that, I understand there's racism in this country. Now you need to go, and it doesn't matter if the nation is, racist to its core and racist in its blood. You need to go out and vote the right way. Well, how is that going to fix anything? Because you guys have been in power for decades in these places, whether it's the police chief being a Democrat, whether it's the governor, whether it was the president for 8 years. And now you're saying, vote for Biden, the guy that imposed all the expansion of all of the imprisonment population back in the 90s. I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think it's going to happen.
We haven't got much time left, but I now want to focus on the warped mainstream media and social media, because let's have a look at this. This all started when Twitter decided to link to a CNN fact check about Trump's tweets about mail-in ballots. And that's when Trump, he had that executive order threatening to, reinterpret Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which basically protects Facebook, Twitter, YouTube from all liability because they are a platform. But that section also gives them some editorial discretion as well. So they get the best of both worlds there, which he is not afforded to. In fact, that there was just a local a court ruling yesterday that that Australian media organisations are responsible for Facebook comments underneath their stories in the defamation of Dylan Voller, that Aboriginal youth criminal in the Northern Territory. So these social media companies, they've had it sweet for so long, and but they're allowed to, well, the exceptions for when they're allowed to editorialize, they're not broad. And of course, it was the next day they decided to double down with saying that Trump was glorifying violence when he said these thugs are dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, and I won't let that happen. Just spoke to Governor Tim Walz and told him that the military is with him all the way. Any difficulty, and we will assume control. But when the looting starts, the shooting starts. And that, to me, was an observation. It's quite a blunt and confronting observation, but this is what we've come to expect from Trump. And we've seen Trump derangement syndrome go to a full level now, where basically the left and the media, they're like a sibling which just does the opposite of what you do. That's how puerile they've become.
Look, the fake news on that front was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. That's the quote. That quote is not Trump's. He didn't trademark that. That's a cultural reference that was made in I think it was the LA riots. That had nothing to do. That wasn't Trump's. He didn't create that. That was a direct reference, I think, to one of the police commissioners there. Now that is him showing that he's tough on this. And in fact, that's how his style has been with a lot of his politicking. In fact, we've seen him in work for over 3 years now, doing these sort of things where he comes out tough, and often the opposition backs down. We saw that with Korea. We saw that with China often, and he signed a deal on China with that, and he did that with Iran. Now, I don't see why people are surprised by that now. I think they're just looking for sensationalism. But it's like I said to start this interview, Tim, the left progressive establishment, they are really flailing right now. In fact, do you play chess, Tim?
No.
You don't play chess. Ooh, do you play any video games?
I don't have time for that sort of stuff anymore.
Have you ever played a game where, in order to achieve your chief objective, take out the king, for example, in chess, sometimes you have to sacrifice a lot of your pawns to get there? Well, the Democrats they've run out of options. They've got no option right now, the media and the establishment, to get rid of Trump. They've run out of everything. Coronavirus didn't work. Russiagate 1 and 2 didn't work. Now they're trying to go for the jugular because they are desperate. They have given up the debate on guns. That is gone. That is absolutely gone now. It's gone. In terms of the debate on coronavirus, it's done. Notice how during the coronavirus situation, all of the leftist ideology, all of the professors about their gender ideology, that all flailed away. It turns out that men were more susceptible to the virus than women. That means there's a binary.
Well, the statistics only had binary on the binary breakdown.
Well, it did, but it did have a trend, though, didn't it? It had a trend that men were more susceptible, and it also had a trend that being fat wasn't that great. So all of the I'm proud of my curves group. Turns out that biologically, when it's put to the test, you're actually more at risk. And in fact, that's one of the reasons, Tim, why it's not racist that Black America is being more disproportionately affected by the virus, because they are more obese. They've got more heart conditions. There's a whole bunch of issues.
Well, you had plastic Nancy Pelosi. Her face nearly melted under that mask. She fat shamed Trump, which they were supposedly against, saying that somebody like him who's morbidly obese in his age range, should wear a mask. And they loved all the governors that were locking down their states, and the mayors were locking down the cities. Remember, they hated the anti-lockdown protesters who were peaceful, even though they had guns, and that not one bit of property was damaged. And remember how they all thought that a civil war was going to break out in Richmond, Virginia with the gun rights rally? Nothing happened there. But they all thought that these people were dangerous and irresponsible. Oh, you want a hair? You're demanding a haircut. How dare you? But apparently, social distancing, curfews, house arrest doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, they were saying you're killing grandma. You're killing grandma. Get home.
Well, they are killing people now. These writers.
Exactly. And now look at this for a second. Isn't that interesting? And I did a big post on this. First of all, you lock people in their houses. You destroy their jobs. And I use that word advisedly. They destroyed the jobs, because if you've been building up a company, building up the capital, and you lose all that, you can't pay the loans, and all your savings are gone.
It's not as simple as in normal times to just get another job. There are no jobs because you shut them all down.
Yeah, when you destroy a job, it's gone. It's gone. It's not coming back. So there are over 40 million people in a nation with a workforce of about, I think, 220 to 250 million. 40 million are jobless. 25% unemployment rate. This is crazy. Now, it's the perfect storm. All of these cases, most of the corona cases were all in Democrat-run states. I mean, if you compare New York State to Florida, where Florida has 3 million more people, and they're very comparable. It was a way better run in Florida, which was Republican.
Florida seems to be the place to be. Democrat Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican senators, and you have there, down in Miami, a bunch of fiercely anti-communist Cuban Americans, and it actually is one of the few multicultural melting plots. So. Florida is, if you're looking to a place to sort of settle into the United States amongst all this chaos, Florida is the place to be. It's where chair of the Proud Boys is Enrique Tarrio. It's also where Laura Loomer is as well. So yeah, that should be the new America.
It might well be, and look, this is the reality of it. When people leave California, they say take someone with you because they want to get all of these people out. It's very glamorous in California, but people don't know how bad it is there, and people are fleeing there. In fact, so many people are fleeing from there to Texas. It might even flip Texas blue.
That's the thing now. So
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, make sure they don't go further east to Florida.
Exactly. In fact, there's actually more Republicans in California than Texas. A lot of Texans don't realize that. But yeah, that's the reality of it.
Yes, and we also saw a Republican congressman censored by Twitter as well, because he said about because Trump, we already discussed, he's going to designate Antifa a terrorist group. This is what Matt Gaetz said, a Republican congressman from Florida. Now that we clearly see Antifa as terrorists, can we hunt them down like we do those in the Middle East? And apparently that glorified violence. When George W. Bush said that he was going to smoke out the 9/11 terrorists from their holes in the Middle East, Twitter wasn't around then, but would they have done that to his tweets? People celebrating the killing of Osama bin Laden. I don't think Twitter was woke back then, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say something like that. I mean, Matt Gaetz is a bit sensationalist. I like him very much, but that was a bit out there, the hunting down terrorists like that. Because you need to always remember, a lot of the libertarians out there and conservatives too could use a dose of this. It cuts both ways. This is what happened under Obama, and this has been one of the great critiques of progressives on the Obama years, because they said the expansion, the Patriot Act, for example, is very unpatriotic. The spying that was done on Americans, because when you want someone to look into your affairs because you suspect something of that person, you can believe, if you think that they're not looking into your affairs as well, you're ignorant, because this power cuts both ways, and it's very scary because you don't get it back.
And people have demanded that Trump's Twitter account be terminated for glorifying violence. Who decided that Jackass Dorsey, as he is called, is now the arbiter of what is moral and is the global arbiter of what is glorifying violence? Like, nobody elected him. The same with Mark Zuckerberg. All these people, like, why do they elevate these unelected social media people as superseding the United States president?
It's ridiculous. But a lot of people have been calling for that for a very long time. I think the first I heard something like this was from Sam Harris, who said that he didn't act, and I like Sam very much, who said that he thought that Twitter should delete Trump off Facebook and ban him because he uses his Twitter account to threaten other countries' nuclear war. So, I mean, it's a good point, right? But it is a free speech platform.
I'm not sure if you've seen the comments about what if World War II Twitter was around. Winston Churchill calling Hitler a wicked man, a monstrous product. Twitter would probably say, oh, that's glorifying violence, threatening another country. And he also said, we will fight them on the beaches. That's quite an inflammatory statement there. Churchill wouldn't have lasted long on Twitter.
That's pretty, when you put it that way, it's pretty funny in that context. No, I think that Twitter, all the censorship stuff, it's coming full circle now, which is another area where they've ceded ground, because we now see doctors, for example, with the coronavirus being censored. In fact, I don't know if you saw this today, but there are a bunch of doctors that signed this letter saying that it's okay to protest because it affects the health of the nation. And this is why people don't trust the experts sometimes. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. You've read my feed. I like to keep a very balanced mark on this, but I understand why people are skeptical of these things. And it's crap like that. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Is there anything else that I need to express my outrage about on this? Oh yes, the local Antifa Marxist groups trying to import Black Lives Matter rallies here. There was one in your home city, Sydney, last night, where of course nobody was issued a COVID infringement notice. I already mentioned that there's going to be one on Saturday where there's already an indication none of them will get fined for breaching social distancing. And I watched the ABC last night, and they immediately decided to report on Aboriginal deaths in custody and mass incarceration, fueling the local flames. And Tim Blair on Sky News last night took the words out of my mouth. Weren't the left against the Americanization of our culture, but they're wanting to import this? African Americans and Aboriginal Australians, they're not the same race. Like, they just have similar skin complexion.
This is why I keep a diary, Tim, on I think it was, did we have Sorry recently? The Remembrance, not the Remembrance Day, the Remembrance Day, or sort of, where Kevin Rudd did that apology.
And apparently today is Mabo Day as well. The High Court decision, 1992.
Well, there you go. Well, anyway, I did a post a few days ago. I was replying to Dr. Stephen Shavira, great bloke, very smart, and I made this point exactly, and this was before this man George Floyd died. I said, Brexit will come to Australia. It's only a matter of time, and these are the people who will be leading it. And that's the reality of it. The reality is that Black people will leave the Democratic Party. We will see that in the stats and the exit polls in the US, and we will see that eventually in Australia when they realize that these people in the Greens, in the Labor Party, they have done nothing for the Aboriginal community. Now, it's the same issue with the Aboriginal community. There are genuine concerns there that need to be resolved and heard. They're people, but they're not being resolved by pandering and people who just get the vote and then use it for nothing, except for beating and getting more power. And this is the thing I want people to watch out for. It's literally about what's right and wrong. It's not about partisanship. It's about the truth.
Maybe it should be called absent in Australia. We already have de facto absent advocates in Warren Mundine, Jacinta Price, Anthony Dillon. And it's of course it's all of I both know that all the protests about Aboriginal disadvantage and grievance, they all take place in the inner cities with the mixed race Aborigines, not out in the remote areas like Alice Springs, which shows you that it's more about a ulterior motive and agenda rather than genuine welfare.
No, look, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we haven't tackled these problems yet. We've had them for a very long time, but no one is willing to have the discussion except some of those people you listed. And it's been phenomenal to watch them talking. I mean, I saw Jacinta Price a few months ago live, met her. She's a lovely lady, and she's really trying to tackle these problems. And I hate it. I hate it. We have the same issue with Islam, where there's a group of Muslims that are great. They're lovely people. They pull out the best parts of the Quran and they live lovely lives and they're great neighbors. And then you get, radical Islamic terrorists. Now, when you try to have the discussion in a public context and say, this is the line of radicalism and this is the line of, moderatism or being, living a lovely life, we can't have that discussion when someone says, oh, you're being racist or, oh, you're being Islamophobic. Same with these issues, or you're being racist. How dare you say that they have, high levels of, incarceration rates, or they don't know how to raise their kids, or, this woman doesn't need no man to run the family. It's like, are you kidding? I'm trying to solve this issue. There is a correlation between some of the problems these kids have and a father not being around. No, that's me beating up men. I'm saying men take on more responsibility. That's important. That's empowering for feminists as well. Now, I think that a lot of the issues that we're seeing in Australia can be solved, and it's incredibly possible to do it if we are willing to have the discussion. And that goes back to the words of John Anderson, the former Deputy Prime Minister. We can't get good policy out of a bad public debate, and that's the reality. And Tim, if you don't mind me just touching on just one last thing before we finish, I really want to nail this home. The protests in the US, they started off as protests, peaceful protests. Then they devolved terribly, and the madness grew, and it's gotten insane. And this Antifa group, don't underestimate them. They've been incredibly sharp in how they've manipulated the people and manipulated the crowds and prepared for them, including things like, and I'm sure many of you would have heard this already, placing pallets of bricks where there's no construction around. They put a pallet of bricks in the middle of a road, and they might put a fence or two around it, or no fence. They'll know that exactly, and they'll know that the protests are going to come through there. Oh, great, a brick, and then they throw it at a window. In fact, there was a black woman. She was saying how she went to this car full of white kids, and she knows the brick came from them, and she's waving at them. She's saying, "Why are you bringing these here? Our boys, they'll get in trouble for using these and throwing these. Why are you doing this?" And they say, "I'm sorry, I'm this, I'm that." The Antifa types, they're there, and they need to be called out. In fact, they've done a number of different things, like prepare Molotov cocktails and leave them out. They've left water out so that people they don't run out of supplies. They stay hydrated, and keep going. We need to call this out because it's incredibly dangerous. A lot of the things I've been railing about, and you've been giving me a platform on, like socialism in our universities, what Drew Pavlo in Queensland is fighting right now, this is going to boil over. And the longer
Drew
this,
is supporting the Black Lives Matter protests in the United States.
But he does draw some distinctions as well, though. And I do think that the biggest distinction that needs to be made is that there are genuine concerns, but there are also the violence must be 100% condemned. And people like Majid Nawaz have been doing a very good job at that. And I just think that the problems that we've got in our society can easily be fixed if we have the discussion. Now, the conservative establishment in Australia, they need to recognize why this is happening. And we can see it a mile off. We can see it coming to Australia if it's not entirely here yet. We still have time. All of the conservative commentators and commentators around the world that have come to Australia, like Douglas Murray, they've told us, you need to watch out for these things. If we can't come together and address them, we're stupider than the establishment over there, because we had years of preparation. I've known for years, and I'm just a kid. I'm just a kid compared to some of these establishment conservative types. We need to take some real action, or we will lose this country, because this isn't a movie. You know, this will happen, and peace is very fragile.
Yeah, it's hard to. I know that Trump ran on "Make America Great Again." His slogan now is keep America great, but certainly things aren't great right now. But as I said before, I think not to you, but to Victor previously, that 60s and 70s with the riots in the United States, the stagflation, unemployment, inflation, the oil crisis, pollution, everyone thought the world would end by 1980. Then it was morning in America again, and the 80s. It was a wicked, awesome, prosperous time in American history. And yes, we do follow America's lead in a lot of things. That was, we're in a dark place in the late 70s, early 80s in Australia, but we came through it. But it wasn't just through a natural cycle. People had to change, campaign for change, and leaders were elected to change things.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't kind of disagree with that at all.
Oh, thank you so much for venting with me, Joel. It's as I said at the beginning, it hits you with this that, wow, like it's just all of the things that we've been railing and frustrated about have just come to fruition at once, and it still hits you.
It's very scary, Tim. I've been, on a personal note, I haven't been getting a lot of sleep this last 2 months. This year's been insane, and yeah, look, it seems like it's all coming to fruition now. I mean, there's a reason. I believe there's a reason why a lot of this just caught people's attention who are looking for these dangers, and I think it's entirely possible that the tide's turning against us very swiftly. I mean, it's been turning against us for a very long time. But as I alluded to about the chess game, we could be looking at a very bad situation right now. While America right now is occupied with those riots, I mean, I might leave this prediction here that I put on my Facebook. We could be looking at some kind of attack by China on the US. I mean, there's this saying from this Japanese general from World War II. He says, behind every reed in America, or grass reed, there's a gun. Well, all the guns right now, they're pointed inwards.
And
so who knows what could happen.
China, their leadership is able to point to the citizens of their country and say, they're trying to teach you that democracy is the best form of government. Look at the US on fire at the moment, and of course they keep getting stronger. They've come out of even though it started the pandemic in China. That's where the virus was born in Wuhan. They're certainly gearing up. Their ascension hasn't taken a dent, and we left out the UK as well. Mark Collett summed it up well, that the UK is now a Soviet snitch state, and that I'm sure you've seen the thing where you have to clap for the NHS workers when they leave home to go to work, and you don't want to be the one who stops clapping first. It's that old where clapping for Stalin. You don't want to be the first one to stop clapping. They're in just a whole new level of insanity there.
No, absolutely, and it's very scary. I mean, oh man, there's a lot to say about the UK, but it might be definitely too late for them, not for us.
Well, it's been another epic show of WilmsFront. Thank you, Joel, for joining me for this second half. And as I said to Victor, who's a Sydney-sider as well, hopefully I can come up soon, shake your hand, embrace you, start getting that physical contact back that we've been prevented from doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it'd be great to meet Victor as well. He sounds like an interesting bloke.
Well, we're still playing the waiting game in both our states to when we can fully reopen and don't have to give our life story to a premises we want to enter.
Yeah, absolutely. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, Tim. But no, look, it's been a pleasure, Tim. An absolute pleasure. I always appreciate coming on.
All right, stay safe. Not from the coronavirus, but from big government and totalitarians.
You too, Tim. You've got it worse. See you later.
Slightly.
A lot. I'll see you later, Tim. Take it easy.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, that brings us to the end of the show for tonight. As I've previously said, on WilmsFront, I'll be permanently broadcasting Unshackled Productions here from my new home studio. As you can see, it's changed a bit. I've got a few more of my books on display here. You can have a closer look to see if there's any unapproved books in there. And I think I've said this previously, but Steel Archer has left the Unshackled. He'll be pursuing his detonation transhumanist show as an independent project there. And of course, I wish him all the best. The Unshackled, of course, still continuing at full strength. It's just that, well, I'm the sole major force behind it. I'll see you all for the Uncockables tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time, on the show YouTube and DLive channel. And then, of course, carrying out the week, Trad Tasman Talk, 6 p.m. on the Unshackled YouTube channel, Melbourne time. Another change that I'm going to be making is I'm going to be deleting our Patreon and Subscribestar accounts. So if you want to support the Unshackled, either do it through our direct membership program on our website, theunshackled.net/membership, and you can still do one-off contribution via PayPal or theunshackled.net/donate. We're not immune from some of the hits that media organizations have taken through their revenue. With shutting down our broadcast studio, we're hoping to save a bit more money for a rainy day and future investments as well. So thank you everyone for watching tonight, supporting us, independent media, and I'll see you tomorrow night. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting theunshackled.net to view all our shows and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.